Let's work through a Stitch Belle project from start to finish. I'll click the Create New Canvas so that I can initialize my project. I'm going to choose a size that's a little bit smaller than the default 4x4. I'm going to go with 3x3. I'm going to keep my 13 mesh count, and I'm going to choose a reference image as my go-by. I hit my Create button and it puts me in the editor view. The first thing I notice at the top, I have a toolbar. Going from left to right, if I select canvas, this shows me the dimensions of my canvas, its mesh count, and if I have a design on my canvas, which I don't right now, it would show me the dimensions of the design. It also gives me the option to resize my canvas. So if I decided that I wanted my canvas to be bigger or smaller, I can change that here. The moving left to right after canvas, the left arrows and right arrows there are the undo redo buttons. Those become active as you make changes to your design. The next three buttons toggle what's displayed in the editor on and off. The first one is the ruler. If I press that button, you'll see my rulers toggle on and off. The next one are the guidelines, which are a little bit difficult to see because the image is in the way. I'll turn off the image, and now I can toggle my guidelines on and off. And then the red cross toggles my center lines on and off. The next button over, the one that looks like a magnifying glass, resets my canvas size. So if I'm zoomed way in like this, and I want to get back to its original size, I just click the magnifying glass button there and it will return my workspace canvas to its original size. The last button allows me to get to some application settings. Here I can see whether or not I've purchased Stitch Belle. If I haven't, this would show me how many days remain in my 30-day free trial. I can choose not to draw with a pencil. If I turn draw with Apple Pencil only off, I can draw with my fingers. Custom branding, I'll talk a little bit more about that when we look at the preview view. And then this last, calibrate screen size, this allows you to calibrate your screen so that when your workspace is displayed in its actual size, the physical dimensions of your canvas are accurate. What you do is you use the plus and minus buttons there to adjust the length of this line so that it's exactly 2 inches compared to a physical ruler. Now let's look at the workspace controls at the bottom. This panel collapses. I can get it to expand by tapping really anywhere on that collapsed panel. And I can get it to collapse by tapping anywhere outside of the control. So like say I tap just above the image, that'll collapse it. I can also use the up and down arrow button that appears on the left hand side there. Let's look at the image workspace controls first. As you can see, the toggle button under image allows me to turn the image display on and off. The slider allows me to adjust the image opacity. The slider button allows me to adjust the image's opacity, which is helpful when I'm wanting to trace an image. The image adjustments on the right allow me to scale the image and adjust its position on the canvas. So if I wanted Pumpkin to be a little bit bigger, maybe to fill in the entire canvas, I can hit the little plus button there, or I can use my slider to get it the size that I want. That looks pretty good. If I want to move my image up and down, left and right, I use the arrow buttons. So if I press the up arrow, that shifts my image up, down, shifts my image down, right, left. And then I can hit that bullseye button to reset my image to its original position. The other two opacity controls, the canvas and the paint, do exactly what the image opacity does. With the canvas, I can make it, or actually more opaque, less opaque, and of course I can turn it on and off altogether. So let me demonstrate how opacity can be used when you're tracing an image. I'm going to reduce the opacity of the image, my reference image, maybe bump up my canvas opacity a little bit so I can clearly see where my reference image overlaps the intersections of my canvas. Let's just say, for example, I wanted to capture the outline of the pumpkin in kind of a darkish orange. And I'll go over the tools in more detail here in a little bit. This is just to kind of quickly demonstrate how you use the opacity controls to trace an image. So let's say I just wanted to follow the dark outline there of the pumpkin with my dark orange color. I'll just drag my pencil along the canvas, tracing the dark outline there to kind of get a first approximation of what the pumpkin design will look like with these highlights like this. And that's just a first approximation, but if I kind of want to see what it looks like, I can turn off my my reference image and see, okay, I've got something that looks like a pretty good start. The last thing I want to point out is the rulers. There are actually 3 rulers. The first one by default is the ruler that shows you the intersections on the canvas, so you can see every 5th intersection has a hash mark that allows you to line up intersections. You can toggle between this ruler and the inches ruler by clicking in the upper left hand corner there. When I click that, the plus there, it turned into inches, and now my ruler is displaying my canvas size in inches. If I press the IN button, it will go to centimeters, and if I press the CM now, it'll go back to the intersection ruler. Now let's look at the tools you use to create your design. I can toggle the display of the tools on and off by pressing the button that appears in the upper right hand corner of the workspace area. When I do that, the tools view expands and I can see all of my tools and my color palette. This view is a floating view, so you can move it around as you need to maybe get it out of your way as you're using the tool. And of course, you can always collapse the toolbar and to get it completely out of your way. So you have a lot of options on how to display the toolbar in a way that's convenient while you're working. Looking at the tools from left to right, by default, when your workspace first opens, the pan tool will be selected, which is just simply a way of saying you don't really have an active painting or erasing or selecting tool. You're just in a mode where you're moving around the workspace to see your work, examine your work. The next tool is the selection tool. This allows you to select a rectangular area of your canvas to either move, duplicate, or erase. And I'll show you how that works when we get a little further along in the design of this canvas. The next one is your actual painting tool, and you've already kind of seen that in action when I was demonstrating the tracing, but here it's pretty straightforward. If you have multiple colors in your palette, you just choose the color you want to paint with, choose your brush size. The size determines how many intersections you paint at one time. With size 1, paintbrush will paint 1 intersection at a time. Size 3, it'll paint a 3x3 square of intersections at a time. So there's a 3x3 square. 5 will be 5 by 5, and so on. The next tool is kind of a specialty tool. This is the thing that lets you paint between intersections. So let's say, for example, you wanted to maybe outline an area of your design to be embroidered. You can actually, and it helps to zoom in to do this, you can actually use the Paint Between Intersections tool to paint, to give some color to the space between intersections. And that can kind of be a nice way, as I said, to outline an area for maybe embroidery or something like that. And of course you can paint in any color you want there. Erase is just like paint, but of course it's removing paint, not applying it. You have the same size options. So if I really wanted to go in and erase, I might choose a really big eraser and just start wiping everything out there like that. So I can also demonstrate, since we've done some editing here, going back to my toolbar at the top, you can see I have full undo, redo capability now. Now let's look at the color picker tool. I've got a design here with a larger color palette, and this is when the color picker tool is helpful. The color picker tool helps you find a color using your canvas. I select the color picker tool, and then I select an intersection on the canvas. And when I do that, it will find the color that I selected on the canvas in my color palette. It will make that color the active color, so I can now begin to paint with that color. This is helpful, like I said, when you have a lot of colors in your color palette that are maybe a little bit difficult to distinguish, and you want to make sure you're painting with the exact right color. And the last one is the draft tool. The draft tool is only available when you have a reference image, and it's really good for initializing or starting your needlepoint design from your reference image. You can always trace your reference image by hand, but what the draft tool will do is essentially do a first draft of your tracing, and then after that it's usually just a matter of tweaking your design a little bit to get it the way you want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the image turned off. The image doesn't have to be turned on in order for the draft tool to work. And I'm going to select about 4 colors to draft with. I can select up to 32. And I'm just going to hit my draft button. And as you can see, what it's done is it's done its best to do what you do when you're hand tracing, and that is to match colors of the image to intersections that those colors overlap. There is a little bit of randomness in how the draft tool works, so sometimes it's helpful to hit the draft button a couple times to see if you get something you like better. I like this one a little bit better because it's brought in some of the green for the stem. I may choose this one as my initial draft, and then this is the one I'll tweak to get the design the way I want it. Another thing to point out real quick with the tools view is when I close the tool view, it will show me what view is, or what tool is currently selected. So here I have the draft tool selected. So when I close the view, you see the little draft tool icon appears in the upper right hand corner there. If I have the paint tool selected, for example, it will show me the little paintbrush. It will color the paintbrush using the selected palette color, and the number there will show me the paintbrush size. So here I know I'm painting with a 5-sized orange brush, like that. Let's talk about the color palette now. The draft tool automatically added colors to the color palette, but let's say I wanted to add a different color. It's very straightforward. I click the add button, and then I click the pick a color button, and here it gives me several options to add a color to the color palette. I can choose from this grid of colors. I can use the spectrum to drag this selector around to find the color I want. Or I can use sliders if I know the exact RGB value of my color or the hex color number. I can put those in here and it will adjust the color that way. For example, instead of 50 for red, maybe I want 75. Another way to pick a color is to use this little eyedropper. If I select it, it gives me this little target, and then any color I slide over will be the color that's selected. The color picker is really good for picking colors out of your reference image. So, for example, let me show you how that works. If I go to my workspace controls and I turn off my canvas, my paint, and turn my image on and give it full opacity, then let's say, for example, I wanted to match the green in the stem. I choose the little eyedropper, and now, actually I need to make some adjustments here. This is where being able to move the toolbar comes in handy. I'll hit add, hit the little eyedropper, and now if I move my target over the green there, it'll pick that green. I can add that to my color palette like that, and now I have the green of the stem that I'll use in a little bit. Another thing to note about the color palette, and I can demonstrate this once we get further into our design, is you can do several things with a color that's chosen in the palette. You can, if you want, erase all occurrences of that color. So let's say, for example, I don't really need my white background. I can just select that color, hit the erase button at the bottom here. It'll ask me to confirm, do you really want to erase this? I'll say yes. And now you can see that the color count for white has dropped to 0, meaning it's unused. The little dash line around that color is another indicator that it's unused. And if I were to hit my remove unused button there at the top, it would take away that white color from my palette, as well as that green I just added because I haven't used it yet. Another thing you can do with colors is merge them. And this is how you basically switch from one color to another. Let's say, for example, I wanted to change the green that was added by the draft tool to the green that I added using my color picker tool. I select that green that I added. I hit the merge button here at the bottom, and now I can merge any of the other colors that are being used into this new green color. Of course, I just want the green that was added by the draft tool, so I'll select that, hit merge, and now, as you can see, the green on my design has been changed to my new green, and the old green is no longer used, and its color count has gone to 0. And now if I hit remove and unused, it'll get rid of those two colors for me. And now my palette only contains colors that are currently being used in the design. Another couple of nice things is you can lock and hide colors. Hiding a color can be helpful when you're trying to find where an intersection is that has a color that you want to change, but it may be difficult to spot because of the complexity of your design. So what you can do is choose the color you want to find on your canvas, and then just toggle the hide show button, and that color will blink basically, so you can go find where that color is located. Maybe a better example would be the green. Let's say, for example, I was trying to clean up the green and I was having a hard time finding some of those little random bits of green. If I toggle my hide show button, those colors will blink at me and I can go find them easier to change. When a color is hidden, you can still paint over it. So this green is hidden. Let's say I select black for my color. I can paint over, oops, I don't want 5 count though. I can paint over those hidden green colors. And now, of course, when I re-show my green, only the greens that haven't been painted over will re-display. I cannot paint with a hidden color, but I can paint over a hidden color. Another nice thing is you can lock a color. And what that means is, if I, for example, if I lock, let's say I lock the orange, and let's say I lock the green, that means that when I paint over my canvas, the green and the orange will not be painted over. So let's say, for example, I wanted to change that black to something like, just for fun, just something really strange. Well, let's say I wanted to change it to a darker orange. I'll add that. I'll select that color for painting. And now I can paint over that black. Now I can paint over the black without worrying about accidentally painting a green section the wrong color, or like, let me demonstrate. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to kind of go down this black line of the pumpkin. And even though I've got a big brush selected, it's only painting the black because my orange and my lighter orange and my green are locked. So they're not being painted over. You can still, unlike a hidden color, if a color is locked, you can still paint with it. So I can still select my green and paint with it. If you need to quickly unlock and unhide everything, just hit the reset button and it will ask you to unlock everything or show all hidden. And I want to unlock everything like that. So that's pretty much everything you can do with the color palette. Maybe a couple of things to point out is you can see when a color is selected, it will give you the usage count for the color and its hex number. That can be helpful when you're trying to match colors to DMC colors and things like that. Now all that remains is to complete my design. I won't go through all the details with that. I'll just finish cleaning up this design so that we can look at the other views. Now that I have my design looking pretty close to what I want, let me demonstrate the select tool and how that can work. The select tool lets you choose a rectangular region of your design to either move, duplicate, or erase. For example, let's say I wanted to change the way the stem is oriented. I can select that by simply dragging my pencil on the canvas. And as you can see, as I drag my pencil, it will outline a rectangular area. The little corners allow me to adjust my selection until I have it just the way I want it. Here I have the stem completely selected. Now at the bottom here, you can see I have several options. I can move it, I can duplicate it, or I can erase it. Erasing is pretty straightforward. If I hit erase, it just goes away. On the other hand, let me reselect it. Let's say for some strange reason I wanted the stem duplicated in several different places. I hit duplicate, and now I can drag where I want another stem to appear and hit place. Drag again, hit place. And then when I'm done duplicating my selected area, I just hit done, and that will complete that process. let me undo that because obviously that's not really what I want. The other thing I can do is I can just simply move the stem. Let's say I wanted the stem to slide over by a few intersections. If I hit move, I can just move the stem over like that, and then place, and that moves the stem over. Another thing I can do with my selection is I can reorient the selection by rotating it and flipping it. So for example, here now I can, or first I have to decide if I'm going to move or duplicate. Let's say I'm just going to move it, but really what I want to do is I want to rotate it. So here I can rotate it at 90-degree angles. And if I hit place, it will take that orientation. I can also flip the stem horizontally, so I could adjust the stem that way. And I can also flip the selection vertically. So that's just another way to manipulate whatever you have selected. So if I flip horizontally and say place, my stem is now facing in the opposite direction. So I think that demonstrates the selection tool. Now let's look at some of the other views. Okay, I have my design pretty much the way I wanted, and the workspace canvas is meant to give you a good idea of what your physical canvas is going to look like when it's printed or painted, but it's not as realistic as it could be. So to give you a slightly better understanding of what your canvas is going to look like when it's printed or painted, there is a preview view. I select the preview view at the very bottom here. It's the middle tab. So if I select it, what this does is a rendering of your canvas as if it's been painted on actual Zweigart mono canvas. It even simulates the tape around the edges. It automatically adds a 2-inch margin to your design. Let me go back real quick and show you, now that I do have a design on my canvas, when I hit the canvas button in the toolbar, you can see the design now is shown. The design dimensions are now shown, and since I'm filling up the entire canvas, it's the design dimensions match the canvas dimensions. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, I were to erase the stem, which would reduce the height of my design. Now if I look at the design dimensions, it's a little bit smaller. So the preview is, as I said, meant to give you a better understanding of what your painted canvas is going to look like. Initially it's sized to fit within the view, but if you hit actual size, this will actually reproduce the dimensions of your physical canvas based on the calibrated screen size adjustment I showed earlier. So this way you can, like I said, you can just kind of get a pretty good understanding of what your design is going to look like when it's painted. When I'm doing a design, I frequently toggle back and forth between my workspace editor view and my preview view, just so I can sort of see how things are coming along. One other thing to note is, by default, the branding on the tape that's drawn around the canvas will be the Stitch Belle branding, but you can change that by going back to the settings view. I can change the branding on the tape by selecting Use Custom Branding in Settings here. And now I can choose a different image to appear on the tape. Let's just say the pumpkin. And I can choose a different word mark. Maybe I call it pumpkin. Pumpkin needlepoint. Something like that. And now, in my preview, it changes the branding on the tape to my image and my word mark. You can export the preview image. Just click the export button in the upper right hand corner. Choose where you want to save the file. Hit save. And now if I go to where I saved my image and my preview image and open it up, you can see I've got an image of the preview. This can be nice if you're wanting to show maybe your collection in a little bit more of a polished way, but you haven't had time to actually paint or print the canvas. Now let's look at the chart view. I select the chart view and it shows me my design as a chart, and this is typically what you would use to paint from. It has its own toolbar. You can see the zoom out, zoom in buttons let you control the size of the chart. You can also use your normal pinch, zoom in, zoom out. The swirly arrow just resets to original size. The button next to the reset button will size the chart in such a way that if you were to print it, it will fit on a single page. So this is helpful when you want a single page chart. Now notice that when I select that button, it kind of colored the chart this light blue. It put a little number 1 in the upper left-hand corner, and it also shows me that this is a one-page chart in the toolbar. If I start resizing this chart, it will show me how many pages it will take to print the chart at that size. And as you can see, since I've made the chart bigger, it will now take 2 pages to print the chart. And the cutoff will be along that blue border between 1 and 2 that you can see on the chart view here. You can toggle this display of pages on and off using the button that's kind of looks like two rectangles, one behind the other, and that just toggles the page display on and off. So it's real important to get the number of pages correct before you export to PDF, so that you can either print everything on one page or maybe just 1 or 2 pages. There are settings that are chart specific, which you can see using the gear button here. I'll press it. So here are the chart settings. You can choose your page size. You can choose your margin. It defaults to 36 points, but if you want less margin and that so that your chart can fill more of a page, reduce that margin size. And now when I say I want a one-page chart, it's a little bit bigger. I've got a little bit more. I use a little bit more of the page for that chart and less on the margins. The last thing is image resolution. This is when you export your chart as an image. You can either export to the actual size, meaning that you get 1 pixel per painted intersection, or as you can see, you can move up in size for 4 pixels per intersection, 8 and 16. Automatic just picks a pixel size for you. So let's say I've got my chart size, I've got the margins the way I want it, and I've got my chart size so that it fits on exactly 1 page. Now I'm ready to export to PDF. I just hit the export button in the toolbar. I say chart PDF. It will let me choose where I want the chart to go. It gives it a generic name by default, in this case, Stitch Belle chart. I can change the name right here if I want. Maybe I call it pumpkin chart. And then I'm just going to save it in the same folder where my images are. I just hit save. And now if I go to that folder, I see my pumpkin chart there. If I open it, there will be a title page, a palette page, which will show you the colors in your design, and then of course the chart. And since we sized it so it would fit on 1 page, you can see the chart is here all on 1 page. I personally like to paint from the PDF of the chart and not the paper or printed version of the chart, because with the PDF I can zoom in and zoom out real easy, and I can also use the PDF annotation tools to annotate and make notes on what I've done. For example, a lot of times when I'm painting, I sort of keep track of what I've painted by marking the intersections that have been painted, like this, for example, like if I wanted to keep track of my stem outline. Sometimes on more complicated designs, it's kind of helpful to count something out and make a note. Like, for example, I might want to say, you know, from here to here is exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 intersections, that sort of thing. Just whatever you need to do to make it clear what you're doing. So that's just a suggestion. Obviously, do whatever works for you, but I have found this extremely helpful when painting from a chart. Let's look at some of the other chart export options. Design data PDF. This is a document that the design data PDF is a document that will capture the dimensions of your design. Let me show you what that looks like. I choose design data PDF, and just like the chart, I get a generic name, Stitch Belle Design Data. I'm just going to keep it for now. I hit save, and if I go and find that document and open it up, I get an image of my design canvas, and then I get the dimensions of the design and the dimensions of the chart. Now the design and chart dimensions are pretty much identical, so there's a lot of overlap there. Here are the dimensions printed out. Here is an example where the design dimensions differ from the canvas dimensions. I just took my pumpkin design and lopped off the top and bottom, but you can see what's going on there, I think. You can also export the design as just an image, a PNG image. When you do that, the grid lines and the guidelines are removed, and you're left with just a pure image of your design. Let me show you what that looks like. And here you can see I just have a image of my design. Let me show you what the image resolution setting does for the exported image. I'm going to select actual size 1, which means 1 pixel per intersection. And as you can see, I have about 39 by 37 or 38 intersections painted here. Now, if I export my image, if I look at that image and look at its information, if you under information, you'll see there's a dimensions, and it's 39 by 38. So we've got 1 pixel per intersection for that image. Finally, you can export your design as an open cross-stitch file. This is helpful if you want to transfer your design to another application like MacStitch or WinStitch that supports this format. A lot of the printing services also support this format, and it's just another way to back up your design. So let me export my design as a cross-stitch file. With my pumpkin design exported as a cross-stitch file, I can demonstrate how a project can be initialized using a cross-stitch file. So here I'm going to choose Import Cross-Stitch. I'm going to choose my cross-stitch Stitch Belle chart. When I do that, it tells me what it's importing, what the mesh size is. I can make adjustments to the mesh size on import if I want. I'm going to leave it with its original 13. I hit import, and here I have my project initialized with the open stitch file that I exported earlier. So that's it. That's a Stitch Belle project from end to end. This design is now ready to be painted or printed.